Good morning, all of you. My name is Dr. Mohammad Zahir, and I'm an archaeologist by passion and profession. I have been involved in a lot of excavations and explorations in Pakistan and around the world. But one of my favorite subject was to study the archaeology of northwestern South Asia, especially the period between the fall of the Indus civilization and the rise of the new or the second urbanization in South Asia. Uh, the the, mm, the point that I wanted to take for this presentation was to share with you my working experience with the one of the most famous archaeological contribution after partition by Pakistani archaeologists is the Gandhara grave culture. So I studied it for quite some time, and in fact my study eventually led me to my PhD to deconstruct the whole Gandhara grave culture concept and come up with new interpretation of this regime. So basically, when we are looking at Pakistan from archaeological perspective, it's usually the most of the talk is about the Indus Valley civilization, or rather the prehistory of the Pakistan. The period between the Indus civilization and the second urbanization or the rise of Buddhism is not neglected. So I'll be mostly talking about this region of South Asia. Uh, okay, so I hope that you are listening to me. I've been told that I have to speak a bit louder. If Pratik, if you have any issues with the sound or the screen sharing, please just you can type in and I'll read you. So Pakistan is basically we do have evidence from right from around, in fact it's millions of years old evidence. So first evidence in this part of the world were discovered around 2 million years before present, and the most famous of them are coming from the Soa Valley. So Soa Valley is basically Soa is a river and that runs from the Murray Hills or the Piedmont Mountains of the Kashmir Mountains, and it goes and joins later on Indus near Attock summit. In fact, there have been 30 archaeological sites have been so far reported. One of my friend, a very good friend, Sushi Noguchi, has provided me with this map. So these are the archaeological sites of the prehistoric nature. In fact, we did some survey in this region and have found ourselves million years old stone tools from this region. So the Soa artifacts are very well known and very well documented within the archaeology of South Asia. So we have at least these four technologies, what we call nowadays, what my friend Atsushi Noguchi called nowadays is the early swan industry, the late swan industry, and the dog patan industry, and the chantra industry. So the dog patan industry, in fact, we have carried out survey in the dog patan area by ourselves and have found many stone tools from our survey. Now these Paleolithic stone tools, they come from surfaces, but there have been, one of the famous Pakistani prehistorian Muhammad Salim have also related these with the geological formation called the Pinjor member and the Pinjor formation. So these are this is the famous Potohar Lewis, and this is the boulder conglomerate, and then this is the Pinjor formation. This formation from Pinjor member is dated about 2.4 million to 0.6 million years ago. And from this region, especially when the new constructions are being made in the Pakistani capital city of Islamabad, we are finding more and more stone tools from this region. Then the second best well-known or well-documented period of the Pakistan archaeology is about the Mehergarh. So you know that this is the earliest settlement site in South Asia. It dates to about 9,000 years before present. We have evidence of structures over there. So there was settlement going on. We have huge, the cultural profile is quite continuous, and it comes up until the Indus. In fact, the Indus civilization can trace its roots to Mehergarh site as well. From Mehergarh site, it was excavated by the French archaeologists, and they have excavated these settlements. They are very small rooms, and these were not provided with an entrance from any side. So the excavator thought that they were probably they were provided with entrance from the top. And from here we have found barley. You can see the barley, the impressions of the barley in mud or solidifying mud. And then we have the sickle blades and the burials came. So this is the first evidence of burials from South Asia, and they were provided with the great goods. Now the Mehergarh polychromic ware is quite unique, and they have produced beautiful wares from Mehergarh from different periods. So I'm not going into the details of the chronological periodization of the Mehergarh, but these are very famous bowls from Mehergarh, and similar bowls have been found from other sites. And the Mehergarh is also known for the best quality figurines, the pre-Harappan. Now, similar in Mehergarh, we have also Neolithic sites in northwest, the old northwest frontier province of the modern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan. So this is one of the sites, the Jandi Babur site. It's a huge site, almost 1 square kilometer site, and it has been excavated, for a small trench was excavated over here. And from here we have also found the Neolithic materials. Gumla was the other site that was excavated by Professor Ahmad Zandani in the 1970s, and he claimed that pre-pottery Neolithic was found from here, although the consensus among archaeologists in Pakistan is that there is no pre-pottery Neolithic. There is no evidence of pre-pottery Neolithic from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. These are late as compared to the Mehergarh site, and similar sites have also been noted. Cave sites, in fact, 1 or 2 cave sites have been noted in northwest near the Peshawar city. In Multan district, they have found a cave that people think that it is Neolithic. So the Neolithic period is one such period of Pakistan archaeology that has not been explored to its potential. Rahman Dairy and the Dera Ismail Khan district of the KP province is another beautiful site spread over a mile-square kilometer area. It has been excavated in the 1980s, the 90s, and recently, trial trenches were dug into the sites. It is one of the best planed pre-Harappan plain city in Pakistan. The site is still, to a large extent, almost 90%, is still unexcavated, and we don't know a lot about the city, but we know from satellite images that there were large streets, and they were cutting each other at right angles, so they were in cardinal directions. Small street intersecting with the larger street. So Rahman Dairy is another important site, and the late Professor Farzand Ali Durrani had a PhD on the site, and he excavated it for a very long period. Now, from within the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in the Dera Ismail Khan region, or southern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the newly excavated, one of the recent excavations were conducted at this Gandhara Khan site. This is again a huge site littered with millions of potsherds, and the cultural profile is huge. The site is very well known for what we think that there is a break between the pre-Indus levels and the Indus levels. So there is a huge ashy layer, and the site was abandoned probably and then reoccupied. It's not clear whether this abandonment was forced or people voluntarily left the site and then regain or come reoccupied the site again. Now, I was told that I should also include the Indus civilization. So, Indus civilization is the first urbanization in the South Asian context. All of you know that the Indus cities were planned. They have huge public buildings like the Great Bath, the Great Granary, and the sites were very well planned. So within the Pakistan archaeology, these are perhaps the jewels of Pakistan archaeology prior to the Buddhism. What I'm showing you are the images on the left side, the images from Harappa, and then the rest of the four images are from Mohenjo-daro. So Mohenjo-daro, the Great Bath, the Mohenjo-daro Museum, the stupa, the famous stupa of Mohenjo-daro, and then these are some pillar bases probably, and then I just wanted to show you some of the glimpses of the seals from Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. Now within this urbanization, in fact the post-Indus period within Pakistan is not very well researched by Pakistani archaeology especially, and it gets into a kind of different terminology, how should I say, it takes different forms within the different provinces of Pakistan. So the Jukkar culture in the, say for example in the Sindh is different as compared to the Perak and the Perak related cultures in Balochistan, and then the post-Indus period takes or the evidence of post-Indus coming from northwestern Pakistan are different from both Balochistan and Sindh. So it takes a different formation then. But what we know is that after the end of the first urbanization, there was probably a gap, and this gap excited people from the very beginning, from the discovery, even the discovery of the Indus civilization, because people knew of the historic cities, and people started to know about the Indus cities, and then they were very much concerned about the what was within these two, because there was no such absolute, people were not absolutely sure that if there was a linkages, what form of linkages were there. So this period went into called as the dark period of archaeology of Pakistan or South Asia, and researchers from across India and Pakistan tried to explain this period. So the second urbanization started in northwest Pakistan. You can see on the left, it's the picture of the Bala Hisar of Charsadda. It's a huge mound, more than 2-3 kilometers square kilometers in area. This has been excavated in the 1940s by Sir Mortimer Wheeler, and later on by the University of Peshawar and Bradford University. And now we know that at least the cultural evidence from this side goes to around 12th century BC. And then from 3rd, 4th century BC onwards, we see this, the flowering of the Gandhara Buddhism in Pakistan. So there are hundreds and hundreds of monasteries, stupa sites, rock carvings. The Buddhist art of Gandhara is one of the best religious art in the world, and we have graphic representation of Buddhism. It's quite vivid, it's quite beautiful, and it's the amalgamation of the artistic tradition of South and Central Asia and European traditions are mixed within this art. So we have thousands and thousands of sculptures from these sites. In fact, what we know from our what we know from our how should I say, from our experience of counting, that most of most of the museums in the world have the larger museums in the world have Gandharan collections, um, and these are recorded almost everywhere in the world. Now, the issue of mm, okay, so in Pakistani museum we have more than 20,000 Buddhist art pieces spread across different museums in Pakistan, and we believe that these many pieces are in, say the British Museum, the museum, the Metropolitan Museums, and the Tokyo Museum, all these museums in Rome. They have hundreds of collections from this area. Now, within this first urbanization, what was within this first, in the middle of the first urbanization and the second urbanization? So, in the 1960s, Pakistani archaeologists and Italian archaeologists working in Pakistan, they come across this unique kind of graves that were not similar, or the similar evidence have not been found in any part of Pakistan or South Asia at that moment, and this was quite intriguing, and it was falling within this perceived dark period um, in South Asian archaeology, and this Gandhara grave culture was different from what we already had in the Harappan period. So there is a clear difference between how the burials were undertaken within the Gandhara grave culture and in the Harappan civilization. So this provided a link to the archaeologist of Pakistan to kind of investigate it and link it with this dark period that that Pakistani archaeologists thought was from 17th century BC, and it comes down to the Alexander invasion. So it was about from 15th century BC onward to 3rd, 4th century BC. So it was more or less 1,000 years gap that these graves fill in. Now, as I told you that the Post-Indus, say for example, pottery or cultures in Balochistan took a different form. So this is the pottery from Pire. It has it is totally different from what we are finding in northwestern Pakistan, for example, and it has the revival of the old kind of polychrome, kachi bag style, handmade, and some were built from pottery. So these were different from what we were finding. Now the Gandhara grave culture was named after a political or geographical entity of Gandhara. So Gandhara, what most of the scholars of Buddhist art and northwestern Pakistan consider is equal to the Peshawar Valley. So this is perhaps this is a rough representation of the Peshawar Valley on this map. It's about 100 kilometer by 50 kilometer area, around 5,000 square kilometer area. So they thought that because the first evidence of these graves, they came from Peshawar Valley, so that's why they called it the Gandharan graves. Although most of the graves that we know are coming from this region, from Chitral, Dir, and the Swat region, the Mangora region. So they are coming from these area, and they were never part of the Gandhara culture, they were never part of Gandhara. In fact, there are different political geographical entities. This region is primarily the Dir, and the Swat region is known as Udyana. So, and the first archaeologists who were working with the graves, they were working in the Dir and the Swat region, and still they were calling it the Gandhara grave culture. The Italian archaeologists working in Swat, they started using a term and then abandoned it later on. They called these graves as the proto-historic graves. And later on they also adopted the Gandhara grave culture terminology, which I kind of revived, and I thought that these graves are called, they should be called proto-historic graves, because this gives us an ambiguity, and it cannot be only associated with Gandhara. Our current research shows that these graves are found from northwestern India to almost border regions of Afghanistan. We have, from some of our students from Afghanistan have reported to us that they have seen Gandhara grave culture pottery from Afghanistan area. So people might have been looting these. Now the proto-historic cemeteries say is known to the Italian archaeological missions before 2013, 2014 are summarized in this map. So most of the sites are coming from the Mingora region of the Swat Valley, and these sites are located along the river Swat. So this is the river Swat that joins later on the Kabul River, and then joins Indus River at Attock. So there were the sites, if you can see from the map, were very few. The Gandhara grave culture, as known to the Pakistani archaeologists, the dean of the Pakistani archaeologists was Professor Ahmad Hassan Dani, who postulated this Gandhara grave culture, and he started using this term in the 1960s. In fact, 1962 onward, he started using the Gandhara grave culture, and he started explaining this whole phenomena of Gandhara graves linked with certain ethnicities, with certain periods, and with certain traits. And he propagated this from that beginning till so. Pratik, sorry, I'll speak louder. You have okay. So Professor Ahmad Hassan Dani started using the term Gandhara grave culture from the 1962 onward, and then he used it until he tried to explain it, and trying to define this in terms of ethnicities, cultural relationship, certain periodization. From the very beginning till almost for the next 50-60 years, he was doing the same thing, using the same data set and using the same explanation, changing words, but everything remained the same for him. Although, with the passage of time, in the time of Professor Ahmad Hassan Dani, there have been many discoveries of Gandhara graves in different parts of northwestern South Asia, but he did not change his perspective of the Gandhara graves. Now, the Gandhara graves that were excavated by the Italian archaeological mission in Swat Valley, some of the sites they were usually located on mountain slopes, so that they are linked with rivers or perennial water sources. They follow the slopes of the river, and there are hundreds, and some of the graves were almost some of the graveyards had hundreds of burials in them. So the graves were very different, and there is no constant style of burial either, or constant way of disposing the dead, or the placement of the goods, and because it was so spread geographically, probably there was geographical differentiation as well. So these graves, say for example, this was excavated in the 1962, I think, and this is called the Tana site, and they provided. Um, I hope you can, Pratik. Can you hear me? Just give me a, if I'm speaking too low, please let me know. If this mic is not working, I can have another, the inbuilt mic I can use. It's up to you. They were the bodies were placed on the slabs, so you can see these bodies are placed in the slab, and in the graves they were sometimes they were stone masonry wall. They would have stone masonry. In this case, it did not have stone masonry wall. Probably there was, as we now know, that they were also providing mud bricks or mud was used to construct the whole grave before burying it completely. No, the studies of so what we know from the Gandhara graves was that there was a flex burial and there was the disarticulated inhumation or fractional burials that the past archaeologists, especially Professor Ahmad Hasandani, used to call them. So we have different varieties. There is a huge variation within the burials of the people, the angles, the orientations, the placements of the burial boards, how they were constructing, say for example, the graves, how they were placing, or reusing the graves, or connecting, the burials from another grave and then burying it with an already newly buried individual, or emptying the already deceased or the skeleton remains from the graves and then burying it with the other graves. So there is a huge variety. Not only that, we have huge variety within the flex burial and disarticulated inhumation. We have the cremation burials of different forms. So there were singular cremation, there were double cremation, there were probably family cremation. A cremation urn would have 5-6 individuals. The cremation urns are quite special sometimes, and they have one usually what the Italian archaeologists give this form of the urn as VTF 72, I think. So this form continues for a very long period of time. In fact, I have shown that the same type of form continues from dated graves in the Swat region for about 1500 years. And sometimes these urns were provided with face-like structure, so they usually have a prominent nose. Then there are holes for, say, eyes. There are prominent eyebrows. Sometimes, the cremation remains were buried within these boxes. So there was a lid in a box, and then it was a grave was dug for this box, and this box is buried. However, these boxes also contain singular and multiple remains of people. We are not sure if they were, contemporary, or they were, like family urns, and people were using or reusing them. The graves are known by the two types of pottery. The redware pottery, you can see that most of these are linked somehow with drinking, and then we have the grayware pottery. So the periodization of both the Gandhara grave culture was done basically using radiocarbon dates. Then we have the what should we say, the articulation or the disarticulation of the human remains, or the cremation burials, and then the pottery, the grey pottery and the redware. These were used, and references from Rigvedic literature were used as a dating material for the Gandhara graves. So we are finding very unique material culture from these graves, and and seldom this material culture is linked with the settlement. Sometimes within the Swat context, we usually have correspondence within the pottery types. But if we are saying, say, for example, the area that I'm working in, the Chitral region, they do not correspond with the settlement findings or with the settlement data that we have. And as I was telling you, the face sound was sometimes provided with pronounced eyebrows. This is the pronounced nose. So they are known as the face sounds, and they are coming from two different regions. So on the left side it is coming from the Swat Valley, and the right one is coming from the Peshawar Valley. And if you can see, they are almost exact copies of each other, although they come from possibly from different chronological as well as geographical entities. Now, the Gandhara graves was also, got interesting reviews by archaeologists. And one of the findings that came from the Gandhara grave was the finding of the horse figurine, from the graves. Horse, as you know, is very important. In terms of understanding, the people coming into South Asia, especially Aryans, people have used them with Aryans, and and they would go to a great length in explaining and exploring the finding of horse bones, say, came from graves in the Swat Valley, and then the figurines also came from the Swat region, and then the iron implements. So these were the iron implements came from the graves, and this gives another opportunity to the archaeologist of explaining the graves. And they thought that the graves with iron are later as compared to the graves with the copper or bronze objects. Although new research suggests that this may not be the case. So we might have evidence of iron at least going back to 12th century BC, and and at the same time we have copper and bronze objects coming from very very late contexts. So these are important. Now the past chronologies said these are the chronologies that I'm giving you is the understanding until 2013 2014. So there were two periodization, and these periodization almost still exist. So the first periodization is by the Italian archaeological mission. So period one, they dated it from 15th century BC onward till 10th century BC onward. So this is kind of consensus date that I have collated from their publication. And then there is the last dates of this periodization comes to the 5th century BC, just prior to the Alexandrian invasion. Similar is the case with the University of Peshawar dates. They start from 16th century BC and they come to the 6th, 5th century BC. Their periodization stops at the say, for example, the invasions of the Persian, Achaemenian, and their rule over Gandhara. So that's the periodization. So generally understood that it's from 2nd millennium BC, and it comes down to almost 5th century BC. So mid 2nd millennium BC to mid 1st millennium BC. It's the general understanding existent within the South Asian archaeology, although new dates have come and new lights have come, but this is what university students or journal people know about it. This have been propagated. So what I did as part of my PhD is that I recalibrated the dates from the settlement in the Swat Valley and the Gandhara graves in different parts of Pakistan. And then I propose, that based on the recalibration of the radiocarbon dates, we have the earliest dated, graves could go up to the 22 until 2200 BC. So this it is possible that these graves started, or this grave culture, as it is known, started when the Indus was at its prime. So it, it started around the end of the third millennium BC, and then it goes on to around 1000 AD. So there is the 3000 years of of similar burial tradition, similar landscape choices, and similar um, material culture coming from this whole northwestern South Asia, and it continues. In fact, we can extend this 1000 AD date more. So our recent dates, say for example from Chitral, where I have been working for quite some time, suggest that you know in the Chitral region, the dated graves, they are from around 8. They start from 8th century BC, and they come down to mid 17th century CE. So if we consider them as the same culture, or if the same kind of burial practices, it's the time duration is quite huge. So end of third millennium CE and coming down to the mid 17th century CE. So that's why I used in fact I introduced the term of tradition, so burial traditions. So this tradition continues within the secluded or hard to access area of northern and northwestern South Asia, and if we conduct more research into these far-flung area, we might find that some of the earliest graves are there, but also some of the latest dates are coming from those graves as well. So you can see that the Shamirande graves that I excavated, we have the radiocarbon date from 4th century BC, as well as the mid 17th century dates as well. So the date range is, if you consider from 2200 BC, is quite huge and almost unparalleled in South Asian archaeology. Now, what the archaeologists say, the Pakistani archaeologists, especially Professor Dr. Ahmed Hassan Dani, who was trained with the likes of Bibi Lal under Sir Mortimer Wheeler, and they were trained in a particular way of explaining particular cultures, and they continued with those kind of ideology. So if you consider the data sets, say for example, Professor Ahmed Hassan Dani was building this whole phenomena on the evidence of 7-8 sites that and in fact, if I may say that, he used just one site data to come up with the archaeological model that he thought was fit for the entire South Asia, at that time. So it's quite ironic that how archaeologists build model basing on very few data set. Now, when I started analyzing and I started documenting the archaeological sites, besides my own, exploration, I recorded about more than 262 sites, I think, if I'm not wrong, 262, 263 such sites. So if you compare building of, a narrative by Dani, say for example, based on a singular site, say Temargaram, and then the proportion of the sites that are now known to us is quite huge. So I started to document them, and through GIS we conducted mapping of the sites. So the sites are so this is the Swat River. Most of the sites are along the Swat River in the Swat Valley. So we are talking about Swat region. Then in the Dir region, which is also part of the Swat Valley, but adjoining to the Swat, administratively it's a different district, and in the past it was a different state. So the Dir state and the Swat state were two independent states that merged with Pakistan in 1969. Although they opted for Pakistan in at 1947, but they got merged in 1967. So it is here that Dani conducted most of the excavation, and it is here that most of the archaeological excavation by the Italian archaeologists were conducted. So the sites are located within the valley settings, within rivers. So, for example, the archaeological surveys that we conducted in in the Chitral region. So this is the Chitral region, which later goes into Afghanistan, becoming a Kabul River later on, and then again enters into Pakistan to become the most prominent river of the Peshawar Valley. So when we conducted archaeological explorations in the Chitral region, and we use systematic survey techniques, so the number of sites exponentially increase, and you can see the number of sites over here concentrated in a very small area. So the number of sites, say for example in the Dir Valley or in the Swat Valley, is not representative of the probably the archaeological phenomena, but it is biased towards archaeological methods, project methods, project funding, what people want to, how they document site, and sometimes just ease of access. They just want to survey the nearest possible region to the river or to the road. So most of the main roads in northern and northwestern South Asia runs along the river. So most of the sites would be coming along the rivers. Then we have sites, new sites, say in the last 15 years have come from the tribal regions of Pakistan. So we have many sites coming from the tribal regions, and these have never been incorporated in any archaeological modeling of the Gandhara caves that we know of. Now these tribal areas have been merged into Pakistan, and they are known as the Bajour and Moman tribal district. But there has been a lot of archaeologists claiming finds of the Gandhara caves within the Peshawar Valley. So if you see the Peshawar Valleys, these are the mountains of the Swat and Dir region, and Peshawar Valley is like a bowl that is covered on all sides, or almost all sides, by huge mountains. And most of the sites that have been documented coming from the edges of this valley. So there have been a lot of alluvial depositions in the Peshawar Valley. In fact, the 2010 flood, brought almost 3 feet of depositions. So if we had, huge floods in the past, if there are archaeological sites, they might have been buried under these. So the finding of these sites on the edges, which were again not part of the constructing of the models for the archaeological explanation of the Gandharan graves, they have been found on the edges, and these could be biased based on the the availability of the data, the survey methodologies, and the natural formation process of the valley, the deposition, the soil deposition, the development, the construction of say villages, and the continuation of the historic villages on the same location, is probably creating a biasness within the data set. But still, there are considerable sites on the edges of the Peshawar Valley. Then in the Gilgit-Baltistan area of the Pakistan region, so these sites are again found along rivers, and these sites have been explored through cultural historical methodologies. There has at least I have not gone through proper systematic surveys in this region, but still, there are quite a few sites in this region. And the the spread of the culture sites is not representative of, say, the archaeological spread of this culture. We don't know, a lot about the archaeology of this region. The German archaeological mission have worked on the Indus River, on the rock carvings in this region, but they have only recorded the rock carvings, and they have never indulged in recording, what is buried underneath. In these sites, uh, you know, we are not sure, so how the archaeology of this region is linked with the protohistoric cemeteries. In fact, some of the sites that, uh, in most of these sites were reported first by Professor Ahmad Hassandani, who thought that, these are late than the Gandharan graves, but they are, sometimes he would link them with Gandharan graves, sometimes he would de-link them, sometimes he would link them with the modern ethnicities living over there, sometimes he would, argue against it. So we don't know. So if we think of the distribution of the protohistoric cemeteries in northern and northwestern South Asia, so at least I have documented the existence of sites. Some of our very good seniors, friends within Noti Alsa and his team, they have recorded sites in the Uttarakhand region. There have been few reports of the archaeological existence of protohistoric cemeteries, say in the Ladakh region. In fact, the Ladakh region was possibly the first that was recorded, and the graves were recorded over there in the 1907, and then most of the sites are in the northwestern Pakistan. So it's a huge area. It's what conservative estimate would lead us, to more than 1 million square kilometer area. And most of the sites are in the Himalayas or the Hindu-Kush Piedmont areas, and they are concentrated, depending on the nature of the archaeological research, in small valleys. So Chitral, the Bajor Momand and Gir region and the Swat regions became the centers of this protohistoric cemeteries. We have also found, or there have been reports of finding protohistoric cemeteries in near the Taxila Valley of Pakistan, and also the Waziristan tribal region as well. New exploration that, including myself, in northwestern Pakistan, have brought to life new data sets, and this is giving us a new opportunity of interpreting these graves. So, for example, the graves at the bottom, where one of my students excavating, so this was what we believe now as of the Chinese ladies, and she was buried there in the mid 8th century AD. These graves are older as compared to this one. So from this site, we have the evidence of from 8th century BC until 8th century AD, and we have multiple burials, burial facing each other, not facing each other, buried in at the different sides of the grave. There are the collation, or the when a new individual was buried, the remains were collected to one side of the graves, and a room was made for the new individual to be buried. Then we have pot burials. Children were buried within pots. So these large pots, they contain the remains, inhumation remains. And then in some graves, they were not permanently closed. I think we now think that these graves were permanently left open. So in this case, for example, this individual buried with another 5 individuals whose remains were collected and to the one side of the grave to make room for it. So at least there were 5 or 6 burials within this grave. Now, Sometimes the bones, the disarticulated bones or the bones from the graves that showed that there was a defleshing. So defleshing was done. We have no evidence from the Swat region. That there were possibly superstructures on top of the graves, which probably hold the the body before the flesh is decomposed. So when the flesh decomposes, they'll collect the bones and then put it in a grave. So for the first time, if you can see in this grave, just above the this large bones, there is evidence of cloth. So they were clothed together. So these bones were buried there in a sack, and buried in a grave. So we have different things. And similarly, when we were working in Swat with the Italian Archaeological Mission under Professor Massimo Vidale and Luca Maria Oliveri, you know, we found these graves that there were periods of opening and closing. So they would leave the grave open, then come back, close it, then leave it, open it, leave it open. So there were periods of opening and closures of the graves, and the graves were never. I think it was never meant to be a closed circle, so the people would come and visit the dead or the bones. And in the Swat region, these graves that the mud walls. Now the consensus is that they were constructing these mud structure first, burying the dead inside, and then burying the whole grave structure under it. So it was not just carving out something of mud, downward, but they were erecting something of the mud, and then they were covering it later on. And there is a huge variety of how they were disposing, the dead. If there was inhumation, it has, I have come up with this, and I can come up with another list of similar list like this, distinct but similar, list like this. So there was no one way that the people were burying their dead, so head would be buried one way, the bodies, headless bodies have been buried, head buried in the cemeteries, head buried in this settlement, emptying of the grave, they would construct intended graves, there would be empty graves where no burial would have taken place. Then there would be graves where the burial would have taken, but they would have removed the larger bones and left the smaller bones. Then there would be graves where they would be putting, the grave goods, sometimes ritualistic objects like the terracotta figurines would be left there. Once they remove the larger bones, then the grave constructions were different. Sometimes they would provide a box-like shape. Sometimes they would construct walls. The walls would be either on 4 sides or 3 sides. They would give a slab underneath, or they would construct a floor underneath. Then they would come up with a slab on top of it. Sometimes they would not use the top slab. Sometimes they would possibly be a coffin. Sometimes they would use the wooden planks to cover the graves. And then, as I told you, they would erect monument or graves from mud and then cover them. Then there would be, say for example, there would be structure around the graves, wooden structures. So there are holes found on along the graves, that indicate that there were some superstructures. Then there are primary grave and satellite graves, things like that. So there are huge varieties within the burial tradition of Gandhara graves or the proto-historic burials. And the same variety continues with the cremation burials as well. So the cremation burials were not a singular phenomena. In fact, uh, they have been using different urns, different, the cremation process in itself was not uniform. Sometimes, the bones would be burned, completely. Sometimes, there would be very few bones would be burned completely, things like that. So it's a huge, um, how should I say? Okay, so there is a huge variety within the burial practices in Gandhara, and then that's why I call this not just a Gandhara grave culture, but rather a proto-historic burial tradition that extended from the borders of Afghanistan and Pakistan, because we have not conducted proper excavations and explorations in Afghanistan, and it continues until almost to the borders of Nepal. So this whole region, in the mountains, the Piedmont areas of the or the uh, valleys or sub-valleys of the Hindu Kush and Himalayas and Karakoram, they contain this kind of burial traditions. And I think, I thought that women were very important, so because, the women are treated almost at par, children are treated at par with the individual, the male, so there is no predominant male presence within these graves, and that led me to think of them as an egalitarian, way, and probably, female were more important, more powerful in this kind of in these burial tradition rather than men. So thank you very much. I hope you have enjoyed it, and thank you. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. Okay, so Harish Prasad, I think that I have to. You have three questions. What will be the usual dimension of the grave, sir? I think I have conducted a statistical analysis of it. It's. Um, I don't remember the exact, dimension, but I'll come down. It's they are not the biggest, or the big, the huge graves that we know from, say, for example, the Buddhist graves in the form of stupa. No, they're not like that. I'll come back to you on the usual dimension later on. In grave, what all they store in pots, sir? In grave, what all they stores? There has, we think that, in fact, the pots are there because they survive. In 2013-14, when I was excavating with the Italian archaeological mission, we found also that there were wooden pots. They were there. So we don't know what we're storing, because no chemical analysis have so far been conducted of that. We have saved some parts, from our excavation in Chatral with the material inside. We hopefully, we think that there was there were food in it, but we are not sure, In any finding of overlapping of graves by changing of time, there is in Swat, so there is a continuous use of singular, say for example, singular graves, singular sites. There were particular places, where they were, using for a quite long time period. Yes, we do have overlapping of graves, through change. What is a satellite burial? Okay, satellite burial. So what we now suspect, that there is, say, for example, in one of the grave sites at Chitral, Gankurini take, So there is a main grave, and then there are smaller grave-like structures. But these grave-like structures, they usually are empty, and they do not have anything. And they are, so if the main grave is, say, for example, how should I say, if it is rectangular in shape, these satellite kind of graves are, places, linked with the main grave, are round in shape. They are lined with stone. They are not. Okay, guys, I have to end. Pratik asked me to end the live coverage and then give you comments by comments. Okay, so thank you very much. Thank you all.